This is the Vic Feazell Show podcast, hosted by Vic Feazell and Jonathan Zimick. Sponsored by Moroso Wood-Fired Pizza, Pinewood Coffee Bar, and the law offices of Vic Feazell. But as it went on, Adams was able to manipulate the media more. Mm-hmm. And by then, they had the Channel 8 thing going, but I didn't know it yet.
Okay.
They had not run an episode yet. But I was getting phone calls from people saying, this guy just walked into my barbershop and was questioning me about you, and he had a TV camera going. Or this man just walked into my restaurant and was questioning me about the DWI I got and whether I paid you money. And I'm like, what? Or I'd get a call from a lawyer. I just got a call or a visit from this Charles Duncan. He just walked in on me. And so they were just starting the rumor mill that Feazell's being investigated by the FBI. Do you know about that?
Whoa.
Yeah, they were spreading the rumor.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was Charles Duncan spreading a rumor that I was being investigated by FBI when at that point I really wasn't. You know, Bob Zane was involved in it, but it wasn't any kind of real investigation yet. They looked at me for a little while, and then the feds pulled back because the Justice Department has a policy that when they're going after a public official, unless they find some evidence pretty soon to keep them going,
right,
then they got to stop the investigation.
Ooh.
Unless there's a public outcry.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's why Charles Duncan was there to create the public outcry.
Create the public outcry. Jim Adams, Tom Pauken arranged this public outcry for this investigative reporter to air 11 episodes about me, and not one word of it true.
God.
Accused me of everything you can possibly think of. Our Congressman Bob Pogue said, yeah, they've accused that boy of everything except sex with a live boy or a dead girl.
Whoa.
Yeah. I liked Congressman Pogue. He was quite a guy.
Quite a character.
But yeah, they were coming after me and accusing me of everything.
This is nuts. So when did Henry ultimately get taken away from you? So, I mean, there had to have been some point, right, where you just couldn't fight it off anymore to where they were going to get him back.
Our grand jury was expiring. We needed a little more time. A couple of the grand jurors weren't comfortable yet. We found out later that one of the men on the grand jury was telling Jim Adams everything.
Whoa.
Yes.
He had a snitch?
He was friends with the Jim Adams and with the city manager at that time, David Smith. They had all been to school together. And so that's how Mark White knew that Maddox was going to ask for funding.
Wow.
That's why Mark White called his press conference before Maddox even got a chance to ask him for funding.
Yep.
It's because
as
he told the grand jury, that grand juror lets Jim Adams know, and Adams called Mark White and twisted his arm because Adams had files on everybody.
So this thing was expiring. You wanted more time, but you just couldn't get it?
We asked Judge Allen to extend the grand jury, and he refused.
Why did he refuse?
I can only speculate.
Sure.
But we found out later that he had gotten a call from the judge in Georgetown.
Ooh.
Yeah. I think his name was Carter. I don't know what went on in the conversation, but I know that, Carter and Boutwell were tight. Our grand jury expired that day, and the judge wouldn't let us hold on to Henry. Now, while the grand jury was going on, it was rumored every day that this Channel 8 thing is about to start. They're going to rip Feazell a new one. Man, Channel 8's going to go after Feazell. Their first episode's tonight. First one's tonight. They've been saying that for a month.
Whoa.
Yeah, maybe longer. And then we lost custody of Henry. The judge wouldn't let us keep Henry, and we had to turn him over to Boutwell right there in the judge's chambers.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I bet he was just on the spot, ready to get him too, wasn't he?
He was. Matter of fact, we had talked to Boutwell in the grand jury, and all this testimony has been introduced into evidence in El Paso and in other jurisdictions. So it's all out there in the public domain now. Yeah, we asked Boutwell, what are you going to do? Because we wanted Boutwell to take Henry to TDC. There's no reason for the task force anymore.
Right.
And Boutwell goes, no, it's going to be business as usual. I asked him, I said, what do you mean business as usual? You mean taking more confessions? He said, yeah.
They've been stockpiling since he's been with you guys.
Yeah.
We got a lot to catch up on.
That's basically what he said, that we had been interfering with their work.
That's
and now
crazy.
Now that our circus was over.
Oh, your circus.
Our circus. He called what me and Maddox was doing in our grand jury a circus. Now that our circus was over, law enforcement could get back to their business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did they, in fact, go back to the confessing machine thing again?
They took him back to Georgetown, and they tried to get him to confess, and he wouldn't do it.
Okay.
He shut down. He wouldn't talk to him.
Whoa.
Yep. And 2 weeks later, they took him to TDC and dumped him off at death row.
Wow.
Said, all right, Henry, now you're going to get executed. The only reason you weren't executed before is because you kept confessing. Now you're going to be executed.
And that's just wild that he would just end it like that. And I think this is the perfect time to put in a clip we have of Hugh Ainsworth talking to Jim Boutwell, interviewing him. And he asks Jim, what do you think of Lucas as a person, is a man, if you will? And Boutwell gives a very interesting explanation about their relationship with each other. And, you know, to kind of recap on what their process was for getting these confessions to begin with.
How do you feel about Henry Lucas? I mean, here you've got a guy that is disarming, is friendly. You obviously have a lot of rapport for him. You obviously feel for him as a man to some extent. And yet he's done completely unfathomable things. How do you feel about him as a man, personally?
You have to have mixed emotions about that. He's doing something now which is a very valuable service to law enforcement and to mankind. You can't help but give him credit for the fact that he knows he doesn't have to clear up these cases. He knows he doesn't have to talk. And yet he does want to get it straight. I think it's he knows he's caught. He knows he'll never again be free to roam the streets. And what does he really have to lose by clearing it up? I do admire the fact that he's being candid. Now, a lot of people don't believe that a lot of this has happened. When I first interviewed Lucas a year ago, when he told me that he'd killed 156 people at that time, I didn't believe that at all. Well, now we've confirmed something like 140 cases, and he has stated that he's killed over 300. I think this is quite possible. The way that these cases are confirmed indicates that he would have had to be there, because he certainly couldn't have read about each and every one of them in a newspaper somewhere. He had knowledge of minute detail.
And how did Henry feel at that point? I mean, he had to have felt used, right? Because he had this bond with them, you know, where you keep confessing, you keep getting good things. You get all the smokes you can smoke, you know, like you said, a TV in the jail cell, milkshakes from Sonic, whatever you want. I mean, he had to have felt betrayed, because he had to have felt that as long as he's confessing, he would never face any real punishment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he had his feelings hurt. He told me that Boutwell was like a father to him, and that Prince had always been like a brother. And for them to turn on him like that just because he wouldn't lie for him anymore, he felt used. He felt used. He had his feelings hurt.
Not that it wasn't totally warranted. You know, it had to have ended eventually, but...
Oh, yeah.
I mean...
You think? I don't know what would have happened if I'd have never stood up. You know? When they arrested me, they put me in handcuffs. They're walking me down the sidewalk. And we've played clips of this before. When I said, you know what's going on here, and I'll still be proven right. I'm shaking my finger at him.
I think y'all know what's going on. What I've said all along, I'll still be proven right.
And it's still going on. It's still being proven right after 30 years. But if I hadn't done that back then, I don't know if it wouldn't have all just stayed under the rug.
Whoa.
You know?
My curiosity.
Eventually, that had to have stopped taking confessions because they would have run out of days.
Right.
You know? And then they take Henry and they dump him off and he'd be executed for orange socks.
Right.
You know? But I don't know what would have happened. I do know that now there are 30 cases that have been solved because I dug my heels in the ground. I wouldn't let Henry plead to those 3 here, and I'm the one who pulled the top off of that Pandora's box.
Yeah. In my curiosity too, Vic, to talk about, other district attorneys, do you think that they were a little more gullible than you were? And like you said, usually how it went is they got a phone call, they got a file with a confession in it, or they were sending their files to the Rangers. I mean, do you think that other DAs may have caught on to it being a hoax, but they just kind of let it fly? Or do you think that they were actually tricked?
I think people had their suspicions. There was nothing that would just knock you in the face and say this is a hoax unless you got into it pretty close. So
Right.
like the Orange Sox case, those lawyers, they knew it was a hoax. And they knew that Henry was a participant in that hoax.
And you also had the benefit of Hugh Ainsworth, too, who did a ton of investigation.
Yes.
So at least you had a lot more resource than other folks to be able to
Yes.
discount them.
And then also the information the grand jury gathered through its subpoena power. We subpoenaed witnesses from all over the country.
Oh, that's awesome.
Subpoenaed documents from all over the country. Ended up with the Attorney General report on the Lucas confessions.
The Lucas Report,
The Lucas report.
available on the website. We'll put it up there for folks.
Available on the website. Not only is it available on the website, but you have turned it into
A database.
a database. It's searchable.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be a valuable tool that people can use, people that looking into this as their hobby, or if there's any law enforcement people listening that want to use that as a tool. It's there for you.
Yep. I'll tell you exactly where Henry.
Yeah.
And
It's
his-
not up right now.
Not yet.
Today is what, July the 19th,
It is.
2019?
It is.
Yeah. So, but it'll be up there. It'll be up there shortly.
Let me ask you this. What were the 3 murders that he originally had in your county? Were they the triple murders, or was it 3 totally separate
No,
ones?
3 totally separate. Rita Salazar,
Right. So we
little
know
girl
that.
who was kidnapped out of Georgetown. Her and her boyfriend, Frank Keyes, were murdered. Her body was dumped in a ditch in Hewitt, which gave Waco concurrent jurisdiction over that murder.
Okay.
So he confessed to the murder of Rita Salazar. He confessed to the murder of an older gentleman in Belmead named Glenn Parks. And then he confessed to the murder of a black prostitute. Her name was Dorothy Collins, I believe. And we already had a really good suspect on Dorothy Collins because there was an MO for that murder, a method of operation. And we had seen it 4 or 5 times.
Whoa.
Yeah, black prostitutes being picked up from East Waco, taken out in the woods and stabbed to death.
Whoa.
Yeah. This guy's name was Joe Leeming. He was an awful person. He looked like a vampire. If you can imagine, vampires were real. He had this pale skin, this dark, stringy hair. He was real thin and long, skinny fingers, and he was creepy looking, and creepy talking.
Great.
Yeah. One lady managed to escape from him, and she identified him.
Whoa.
Yeah, he got greedy. He kidnapped 2 prostitutes at the same time. He was going to take care of them both.
Wow.
So he takes one out first. He had taken the handles off of his car on the inside so you couldn't open the car doors from the inside except for the driver's car. He would have to get out, go around outside, and open the door. So he took this one girl out of the front seat and took her into the woods. And this other girl was in the back seat.
Okay.
And she said, I could see a little bit out from under my blindfold. He had tied me up and blindfolded me. And she saw him. She said, I saw him come walking out of the woods holding a bloody knife. He licked the blood off of it, and he was hunching the air like a dog.
Whoa.
Yeah. She managed to get away from him.
Wow.
He opened the door to let her out, and she managed to get away. And she identified him. So we figured he was good for Dorothy Collins, too, because it was the same kind of M.O.
Yeah.
And she had been stabbed, and she was a black prostitute, taken from the same area. And Joe Leeming had told Truman Simons, Truman said, we know you did these others. He said, I tell you what, if I'm found guilty of this one, I'll confess to the rest.
Wow.
Well, he was found guilty, and then he reads in the newspaper that Henry Lucas confessed to Dorothy Collins.
Wow.
So he wouldn't take any other cases then. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had the guy who did that one. Glenn Parks, we had a good suspect, but we were never able to prove it. And then with Rita Salazar, that case was solved 30 years later.
Yep. We actually have the news clip from KXXV when they did catch the real killer of Salazar. Here, let me play some portions of this clip so our audience can hear, what it sounds like as these cases are finally being solved all these years later.
Well, a convicted serial killer who claimed he was more famous than Elvis has his story changed 10 years after his death.
Henry Lee Lucas said he killed thousands of people, including an 18-year-old woman, right on I-35 in McLennan County. But News Channel 25's John Coco tells us police now have hard evidence another man committed that murder. John?
Well, Bruce, and tonight we'll show you video of Lucas copping to the death of Rita Salazar. You'll hear from the former district attorney who refused to prosecute him despite that confession. He's now vindicated decades later. But what about the man authorities say really killed Salazar? He's now in jail in Waco.
Where did you shoot her at? She was along 35 on the weekend.
This is Henry Lee Lucas in 1984, already in jail convicted of one murder, confessing to another that he didn't commit.
You remember how many times you shot her? Well, 4 times, I think, I'm not sure.
He's admitting to shooting Rita Salazar in 1978. Her bullet-riddled body was found along I-35 in Hewitt. This is the original diagram I obtained of where she was shot. Salazar was killed along with 19-year-old Frank Key. They were riding together when their car ran out of gas near Round Rock. Key's body was found between Georgetown and Austin. The McLennan County District Attorney at the time, Vic Feazell, seen here with Lucas, says he was pressured to indict the killer, but he didn't buy into the confession, recorded or written. Now there's just one last question. Who did kill Salazar and Key? In June of last year, authorities linked this man, 52-year-old Benny Tijerina Jr., to the case with DNA evidence from 2007. Exactly 1 week ago, Tijerina was transferred to the McLennan County Jail and is now awaiting his indictment.
It was Rita Salazar I was talking about when I sat on the courthouse steps when I was arrested. You know what's going on here, and I'll still be proven right? I was thinking about Rita, because that's the one they kept pushing me to let Henry plead guilty. They were more interested in Rita Salazar because she was from Georgetown. Boutwell was an elected official from Georgetown. He wanted the good PR that I solved this murder, just like he did with Orange Sox.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes
and then
sense.
and then this one that he was later really embarrassed over, Carolyn Shervinka, a young lady from Taylor, Texas, which is a town about 30 miles east of Georgetown. She turned up missing. She was driving her car and never got to where she was going. Henry confessed to that one. Boutwell got him to confess. Henry gave all kinds of detail. He described a necklace that she was wearing that had a little gold C on it, and for Carolyn, and that he had pawned the gold necklace. He said that the front fender of the car had a dent in it. Kind of looked like it might have been hit by a baseball. Well, sure enough, Carolyn's little brother had accidentally hit the fender of her car with a baseball. And so it was a dent from a baseball. So they cleared Carolyn Cervenka's, quote, murder with Henry's confession.
Wow.
A year later, Texas was going through a severe drought. The water in the creek between Taylor and Georgetown started to go down. A passerby sees the hood of a car down there.
Whoa.
Yeah. They call the cops, they call the wrecker, they get the car out, and there's Carolyn Cervenka dead in the car.
Whoa.
She had had an epileptic seizure, had gone off the bridge and drowned, and she was still wearing the little necklace that had the C on it.
Wow.
Now, how the hell did that happen?
Whoops.
How did that happen? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Yet Boutwell, when he's confronted about you fed Henry the facts, well, that's a damn lie. We've got that on video. Let's find that audio and play that for our listeners.
Yeah.
Well, that's a damn lie. Well, tell me, Jim Boutwell.
Yeah.
How did Henry know about that necklace? How did he describe that little golden C? How did he describe that dent in the front fender of the car? Unless you told him, Jim Boutwell.
Yep.
How did that happen?
Yep.
No. Well, you know, Henry, well, he was a little bit psychic. That's what Boutwell
that's what I
said.
said.
He was a little bit psychic.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Wow.
And Boutwell really expected us to buy that bullshit. And back then, that bullshit walked.
Right.
It did, because you were not supposed to violate the law enforcement brotherhood.
There it
And
is.
who is going to point the finger at law enforcement and be taken seriously other than other law enforcement?
Right.
It's not going to be some little lady sitting in her apartment. You know, it's not going to be some guy pushing the shopping cart down the sidewalk. It's not even going to be the president of the Chamber of Commerce. It's
Right.
got to be law enforcement, you know? And I was the first one to ever stand up and say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Let's look at this. I was the little boy who's yelling, the king has no clothes,
Right.
you know?
What's crazy too, though, is even when you did that, you didn't do it to them in a way of, you know, oh, you're doing all this stuff wrong. Like you didn't approach them with, you know, some aggravation or like accusing them. You said, hey, here's an issue, let's fix it, you know. And it was them that got all defensive and just started, well, defensive at first and then aggressive after that.
I tried to go forward with tact. I really did. I tried to help them save face. I tried to give them a way out.
Yeah.
I met with Adams and asked him to take it off my hands. Clean up your own backyard. And they refused. No, we would rather destroy you. We'd rather go after an innocent man and convict an innocent man of something he didn't do, while at the same time we're letting all these murderers walk around free.
Yep.
There's something sick about that, Jonathan.
There's something real sick. But what is the liability, even looking at it from, you know, a lawsuit standpoint? You know, I'm a family in Minnesota, you know, and my sister was murdered by Henry, and I find out that the ones in Texas are all bogus. Obviously, I'm going to think mine's bogus too. And, you know, what is the legal recourse I have against, you know, the people who orchestrated that?
None. Absolutely nothing. All you can do is talk about it. Be loud about it. Be the squeaky wheel until you get some grease. Have them reopen your loved one's murder case. As far as suing them, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
They have immunity.
That's crazy.
I mean, we still live under the law that the king can do no wrong. And in America, the government is the king. You have to get the government's permission to sue the government. You do. And all these policemen have immunity.
Right.
You know? Now, some of it, the legislature has given permission to sue for this, that, or the other, and they put caps on it to make it to where it's not hardly worth even trying to bring a lawsuit,
Right.
unless it's extremely egregious. But something like this, oh, I had my feelings hurt. I really thought they had caught the murderer of my daughter and they didn't, there's nothing you can do.
That's wild. So what would you do in this day and age if you were law enforcement? And what do you think they should do? I mean, do you think that they should reopen these cases if they still have evidence preserved from them? Do you think it's their duty now to do so?
I think it is their duty. It's the duty of a peace officer to seek the truth, to do what's right, and to fix what you've screwed up.
Right.
And law enforcement screwed this up, man. So law enforcement should fix it. Every single murder attributed to Henry Lee Lucas should be reopened.
Which is 300 plus.
Yeah. All of them should be reopened, including the murder of Kate Rich and the murder of Becky Powell.
Mm-hmm.
Those should be reopened as well. So what did he confess? What evidence is there?
Yeah, none.
You know, let's
Other
look,
than his confession, none.
None. And the confession on Becky doesn't make sense to me. I'm still hoping that someday Becky Powell is going to show up.
Yeah.
Say, hey, I'm Becky, and pass some DNA tests. She's got a brother in Florida named Frank.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to talk to him way back in the 90s. The Florida police told me, the Florida Bureau of Investigation, I can't remember the guy's name, but he said, if you show up in Florida, Mr. Feazell, I will arrest you.
Wow.
Said, Frank is still a juvenile and he's under our care, custody, and control. I will arrest you. I said, what if I just presented you with some questions to ask him? No, I'm not going to do it. So they even had Florida wrapped up into this thing. The Florida Bureau of Investigation trying to preserve these old confessions, these old murders. And when it's a lie, it's just not right. I hope maybe someday Frank will decide to tell the truth about all this.
Right.
I know that he's been approached recently by people trying to get him to write a book to say that it's all true, that he rode around with Henry and Becky and Otis and they were killing people.
Wow.
Now, the problem with that is that there's no evidence to support it. And matter of fact, all the evidence says quite the contrary.
Yes.
So,
And I can tell you from the Lucas report, Frank and Becky were in school, you know, when Henry said, you know, he was out with them committing the murders. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But everybody's looking at it now, you know, how can I preserve my cases? Mm-hmm. You know, law enforcement, how can I keep my case from being looked at? Frank is looking at it, how can I make some money off of this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Becky, God, if you're alive, Becky, please say so. Please say so. Come forward. I mean, Henry's dead. You know, I understand she's probably got no incentive to want to do that. She may be married. You know, she may have grandkids by now.
Yeah.
Not want to be associated with a name like Henry Lee Lucas. But, you know, the truth is the truth, and it might help some other family member of a murder victim get justice. If law enforcement knew that Becky was still alive,
Yeah.
Becky? I mean, the thing that sets Kate Rich and Becky apart, they're the only two he confessed to that he actually knew.
Right, right,
All these others were just random strangers, people he never even met.
right.
He knew Becky and Kate. So if we could look at the Kate Rich autopsy, if we could get DNA from those bones, because I still think they're chicken bones.
Mm-hmm.
And if Becky maybe she'd be one of the thousands of people listening to this podcast, because we already have thousands of listeners,
We do.
that she would come forward.
That'd be tremendous.
Come forward and tell the truth. Yeah, it'd be tremendous. It'd be tremendous. You know, it would take a lot of courage. But Becky, if you're listening, you know, pray about it. Pray about it and then ask for the courage to do what's right. And if anybody's listening that knows what really happened to Kate Rich, send us an email. We subpoenaed Jim Boutwell and Bob Prince to the grand jury. I remember Bob Prince was out in the hall. When I went to get him, to tell him it was his time to come in, he was walking beside me and he looked at me and he put his finger up close to my face. He said, You're going to regret the day you ever heard the name Henry Lee Lucas.
Did he really?
Yeah. And that wasn't the first time I had heard that phrase. Because Clemmy Schroeder told me that Boutwell told her on that night in April when we got Henry away from them with our bench warrant, that Boutwell told Clemmy, we are going to make Vic Feazell regret the day he ever heard the name Henry Lee Lucas.
Crazy.
So, 2 times that was said, at least.
Yeah, at least.
At least.
God almighty.
Yeah, that was the meeting of the big brass. We'll be able to pull some of Clemmy's testimony and some of Boutwell's and talk about that meeting.
Some real gems there, no doubt.
Now, we started investigating Henry and the confessions in late 84. Now, we had to put the investigation on hold before the grand jury because Ned and Truman and I had to go to Cleburne, Texas to prosecute me near deep. It was a change of venue on the capital murder case. He was one of the defendants on the Lake Waco murder. We were up there for 6 weeks, staying in this little cheap motel, driving home on Friday night, driving back on Sunday afternoon. And that's important that I was in Cleburne during all that time. Remind me in a minute, and I'll tell you why. Okay. But while I was up there, I noticed somebody one day in the back of the courtroom watching the trial. And it was a female. She was wearing a business suit. And she stuck around after the trial was over, and she came and introduced herself. She said, I'm Jan Patterson. I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney out of Waco. Well, see, Cleburne's not in her area. She was outside of her jurisdiction.
Right.
She was up there just to see me. She said, let's go for a drink. I said, I would love to, but I just don't have time. I've got to get back to the hotel and get ready for tomorrow. She said, no, I just want to talk with you a minute. Something I'd like to talk with you about. I said, can't we just talk about it here? I really don't. I don't have time. I'm supposed to be with Ned and Truman and a witness in like 15 minutes. And she got a little frustrated, and she looked at me. She said, well, I'm just here to tell you to stay out of the Lucas thing.
Whoa.
Yeah. She drove up to Cleburne, Texas, 90 miles north of Waco, 180 miles north of Austin, which is where she was located then.
Right.
Just to tell me to leave the Lucas thing alone. Yeah. And then later that night at the hotel, I saw her driving through the parking lot at the hotel. I mentioned to Truman Simons and Ned and to even Pat Murphy, who was helping us. He was one of our assistants helping on the case, that she had been there and what she said. Matter of fact, all of them signed affidavits that were attached to our motion to dismiss the indictment based on prosecutorial misconduct. The judge denied our motion, but I'd like to read some of that later because it's incredible.
Yeah.
Some of the things they did, the arms they twisted, the people they threatened, the people they offered deals to.
Yep.
We'll get rid of your criminal charges if you'll tell us something on Vic Feazell.
That's wild.
And that was Jan Patterson. Patterson and the FBI and the IRS, all of them.
Which is why we have a whole podcast series coming out about that and breaking in your office. And it's something out of the Twilight Zone, Vic.
It is. Threatening lawyers.
Yep.
Breaking into my office, busting into my safe. Oh, yeah, it was crazy. Thank you for listening to the Vic Feazell Show podcast. And visit us at www.vicfeazell.com for more information. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.